now, what I'd like to do is call the meeting to order and remind board members, staff, guests, and members of the public are reminded that the full authority board committee meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the authority's website along with the official written minutes. As such, comments and opinions expressed may be published, and any comments expressed by individual board members, guests, and the general public are their own and do not represent the opinions or comments of the full authority and/or the KCCA Board of Directors. The recorded video of the full authority meeting is not considered the official record of that meeting. The official record of the full authority meeting shall consist solely of the minutes approved by the full authority. So as was circulated out in the agenda, we will be conducting the elections of our officers for 2019. And what I have done is made arrangements for Kevin Jackson to be here. Thank you, Kevin. And because all the members to have Kevin lead us in our elections of chair and vice chair for 2019. And just so members of the public are aware of what we're doing at home, if I could have a motion that Kevin Jackson be appointed as interim chair for the purposes of conducting the elections for chair and vice chair. I see Linda Stevenson and Ralph Winfield. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And the motion carries. So with that, I will turn the meeting over to Kevin.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So the election for chair and vice chair of the Cattle Creek Conservation Authority for 2019 will be conducted in accordance with the Conservation Authorities Act, KCCA's administrative regulations as follows. Scrutineers. The appointment of one or more scrutineers is required for the purpose of counting ballots. Should an election be required, all ballots shall be destroyed by the scrutineers afterwards. I have a recommendation in front of me that Tom Marks and Terry Carroll act as scrutineers and that the ballots be destroyed after the election. Can I have a mover and seconder for that motion? Joe? And Allison? All in favor? Any opposed?
It should really be a board member. Do
Actually-
motions for the motion,
Sorry,
for the motion, should it not be a board member?
both the mover and seconder were board members.
Well, this Joe.
It has to go two Joes. I was feeling really bad there.
Just about every meeting we go to now.
Just for clarification, we have two Joes and two Elizabeths.
Oh, yeah, that's very
Make
good.
things interesting.
To the new world.
Opposed, if any? I declare the motion carried. The election shall be conducted in the following order. First, the election of the chair, who shall be a member of the authority, and second, the election of a vice chair, who shall also be a member of the authority. I will ask for nominations for each positions. Only current members of the authority who are present may vote. Nominations shall be called 3 times and will require a mover only. The closing of nominations shall require both a mover and a seconder. Each member nominated shall be asked to accept the nomination. The member must be present to accept the nomination unless the member has advised the Secretary Treasurer in writing or by email in advance of the election of their willingness to accept this nomination. If there is only one nominee, the individual shall be declared into the position by acclamation. If there is more than one nominee, an election will occur. Each nominee shall be permitted not more than 3 minutes to speak for the office in the order of the alphabetical listing of surnames. Upon the acceptance by nominees to stand for election to the position of office, ballots shall be distributed to the members by the scrutineers for the purpose of election, and I will ask members to write the name of one individual only on the ballot. The scrutineers shall collect the ballots, leave the meeting to count the ballots, and return and advise the acting chair who was elected with more than 50% of the vote. A majority vote shall be required for election. If there are more than 2 nominees, and upon the first vote, no nominee receives the majority required for election, the name of the person with the least number of votes shall be removed for further consideration for the office, and new ballots shall be distributed. In the case of a vote where no nominee receives the majority required for election, and where 2 or more nominees are tied with the least number of votes, a special vote shall be taken to decide which one of such tied nominees' names shall be dropped from the list of names to be voted on in the next vote. Should there be a tie between two remaining candidates, new ballots shall be distributed and a second vote held. Should there still be a tie after the second ballot, a third vote shall be held. Should there be a tie, still be a tie after the third vote, the election of the office shall be decided by a lot drawn by the acting chair. If the members understand the procedures, we will begin the election of the chair. Everybody okay? I would now like to call for nominations for the position of chair for the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority for 2019. Yes.
I'd like to nominate Stephen Hardy.
Okay. I would like to call a second time for nominations for the position of chair.
I'd like to nominate Grant Jones.
And I would like to call for a third time for nominations for the position of chair. We have two. I would request a motion to close nominations for chair.
Sorry, moved by Dennis.
Dennis, sorry.
And a seconder?
Yeah.
Ralph?
Ralph, good. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? I declare the motion carried. I would now like to ask the nominee, and I'm sorry, you'll help me with the names again?
Sure.
Grant Jones?
The nominees, the first nominee was Stephen Harvey.
Stephen Harvey, sorry. Would you like to allow your name to stand for the position of chair for Kettle Creek Conservation Authority for 2019?
Yes.
Yes. And Grant Jones, would you allow your name to stand for the position of chair for Kettle Creek Conservation Authority for 2019?
Yes.
Each nominee is now permitted no more than 3 minutes to speak for the office in the order of alphabetical listing by surnames.
Good morning, folks. I wasn't prepared for this, so I'm going to have to make this up along the way. My name's Stephen Harvey. I am this is the second term I've been on the council. And I guess the reason that I want to sit as the chair is simply because I think we need strong leadership and we need some background in the organization. And I have, over the last 2 years, learned very quickly about how this organization works and the strength of it. And I would really like to see the board support that group and to act as the stewards of the area that we are expected to by the people who live here. Quite simply, I have 35 years of experience in administration. I have run, I'm a retired elementary school principal, so I've run staffs for a number of years, and so have the required experience to oversee an organization. And at the same time, I think that I've also learned through my work in municipal politics that we hire a staff to do a job. And so as in the governance role, our job is to govern and not to operate. And so I think that's very, very important. Thank you.
Grant?
I wasn't prepared for this. So, Grant Jones, Mayor of Southwold Township. I've been on council for 15 years now. Been chair of many boards and committees over the past years. Mayor for the past term, 4 years, plus 2 years before that as acting mayor. My family farm, fourth generation in Southwold Township. My father's a huge supporter of conservation. We have 35 acres of conservation land that was planted in '67 and still lands in forest, and he still manages that woodlot. So I'm a very strong supporter of conservation. I sat on Lower Thames precinct to this. Have a lot of experience with Lower Thames Conservation Authority, and was a contributor down there for 4 years. Plus, I still sit on the foundation, which I'm the current president of Lower Thames Foundation. So I think that suits me well. I've proven to be a fair and honest person, and over my years in politics, and I hope it can serve you well.
Thank you. Would the scrutineers please pass out the ballots?
Thank you, sir.
Once everybody has completed, then the scrutineers will pick those up and leave the room to do the counts.
Put the ballot box up the ballot. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, now,
Yeah, well, keep working.
yes. We get the stamps. No, I don't even know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, they could do it. Yeah. Official song, there is one, is there? They make one up.
Hopefully by the end of the hour.
Are you doing on the water training tomorrow?
No, I know what water is, so I'm okay.
Yeah, you're not on the.
No, I had planned to, but there's.
All right. Just wondered if you. Grant, are you doing the primary water board? Are you doing primary water board to?
No, I passed the torch.
You passed the torch, okay. Who is this one?
Rob.
Okay. You're doing the primary. Are you doing that training tomorrow? No.
He's well trained. I did it last week.
You did yours last week. Yeah,
Fine,
they offered
and,
it, they offered it on.
If I can get everybody's attention, after the first ballot, we have a tie vote, so we will have to distribute the ballots again for a second vote.
Now you
I wasn't joking when I said
We got a couple trees of concern.
Yeah, they're gonna hire for it.
Somebody should tell a story. Or something.
Once upon a time. the adult children and their spouses and all the grandkids, we went down to Disney for Christmas time. We were going to prepare brunch on the 31st of December. And so we were, so Disney World, so a long highway to get into the, so we had to go to one of the resorts. And we sat there in traffic, it took us an hour and a half to go 9 miles.
They had to close the Magic Kingdom before noon that day because they had reached the capacity of 275 people.
Incredible. I've never been there, but I can't.
It was just absolutely amazing. So
Places have a sooner.
open my eyes.
Taking the branch out.
Yes, well, it was a wonderful experience. We had a great time.
After the second ballot, we still have a tie, so we will have a third and final ballot.
Boy, this is high tension.
Okay, we're out of
Pardon?
we're out of bounds.
Paying attention. If it's the will of members, I have vice chair ones already done up. I will just strike vice chair with the knowledge that you're voting for chair, if that's okay. Or can I
We
move
can
you
do
guys
it.
strike it?
Yeah.
That's fine.
But it's really quite magical. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Didn't take you this long to do elected.
No, I've never had a tie before. That's unusual.
Find out we have a deep number.
It is.
It is.
Yeah. The mud wrestling pit is already
Okay, so
exciting.
that's what-
That's next step.
We don't really pick a winner that way, it's just fun for us to watch.
Yes. This might be a sign of how we get consensus.
I would hope.
So Terry and Tom in the other room and let them decide.
They seem to be taking long.
After the third vote, we do have a winner, Stephen Harvey.
Oh.
Congratulations, Stephen.
Take a break.
I would now call on nominations for the position of vice chair for the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority for 2019. We only require a mover. Linda?
I'd like to nominate Joe Preston.
I would like to call for a second time for nominations for the position of vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Grant Jones.
Ms. Jones. And I would like to call for a third time for nominations for the position of vice chair. Yes,
I'd
Dennis.
like to nominate Allison Warwick, so we don't have a tie.
Sounds nice you wanted.
Very good plan.
I would request a motion to close nominations for vice chair. Linda and Bill. All in favor? Any opposed? I see none. Motion's carried. I would now like to ask whether the nominees would like to let their names stand and allow the nominees the opportunity to speak. So I'll go through in the order they were given to me. Joe Preston, would you like to let your name stand? Grant Jones?
Yep.
Yes. Allison?
Yes.
Okay. So alphabetically. Grant?
I guess I'll just let what I spoke on before stand.
Joe?
Well, thank you. I'm honored to have been nominated. I'm happy to be serving my first term on Kettle Creek, and I think could do a great service as the vice chair.
And Allison?
Okay, and I too am very happy to be on this board. I was excited when I had the appointment to it. I've had a strong interest in conservation for a number of years. I own and operate a 50-acre farm, which is surrounded by Carolina Forest, and have a lot of strong feeling for the preservation of our farmland as well. So I think I'm a good balance between conservation and farmland preservation. And again, thank you for the nomination.
Thank you. I would ask the scrutineers to hand out the ballots. Vice Chair.
Thank you.
We're going to go one round, right?
Yeah, I don't think you should look away.
Thank you.
No, it's supplied by the city. Yeah. Mine lasted 4 years, so we did pretty well. Did pretty well. Because it banged around a lot. Well, yeah. I would. It's pretty easy. You don't have to. And if you want to cover it, there you go. Yeah, I'm over here to show. Do you want to read in a little bit? No, I won't be. Yeah, it's gonna be cold this weekend. No, it's not good for the residents. It's not good. It's the wall of my washing machine. It always happens when it gets really cold. With my husband. My husband says it a tough one. Tired a lot.
That's right.
Summer, I think.
This one's better. Better show than
Did I get the film after?
So the scrutineers have informed me there was no clear winner with 50%, vote 50%. We will drop the lowest vote getter, and that will be Joe Preston. So if the scrutineers can distribute ballots for Allison and Grant for the position of vice chair.
Oh, that's the first one I've ever lost in life. I never know what it feels like.
You can't take it personally. I just did that.
I'm never glad I'm being paid by the hour.
This is definitely becoming a sign.
This is interesting. This is very interesting.
It's gonna be a lot of recorded votes, I think.
Okay, that's that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Obviously, are not afraid to voice they're not timid.
That's okay.
I'm getting over my shyness. It's taking a little while.
I bet you it is, yeah.
You picked up the school.
Yeah, it seems to be on the down slope now, so.
So just two. And one just got out of the hospital. She hadn't done anything.
She's on the board from
Yes.
Okay.
She used to.
I know what that.
During the time I
I'm
feel
glad you're over
absolutely
there.
perfect and
She was our
otherwise.
deputy.
I got to finish up this year, it's been great.
Yeah, and normally that really works.
We only had the six. Yeah, I wouldn't, I didn't like the wait.
So you guys have to sit here all day, or you just, really? Okay. We'll get to that.
Good idea.
We do have a clear winner. The new vice chair is Mr. Grant Jones. So with that, I will thank you for allowing me to be interim chair and turn the chair over to our new chair, or the new head of table, the new chair.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks very much. We'll take a 5-minute break just to sort of reorganize. Do we need to do that or not?
Sure, and I'm gonna ask my scrutineers, just so you know, that they would stay behind if they can spare me 5 more minutes, because we have the election of the executive committee, and then if it's the will of the chair, that you would do that by elections
I
rather
think
than.
that's going to an 8th ballot.
Can we do that first and let them go?
Sure.
Sure.
If you want to, we can do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've been well and dry.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, Kevin.
Sure.
So our first order of business is committee appointments, and the first committee is the executive committee. If you have read your regulations, you understand what the executive committee does. And it is comprised of the chair, the vice chair, and the past chair, who will fill the past chair role.
So, Mr. Chair, we don't have an immediate past chair. Obviously, Heather Jackson is no longer with us. We do have a past chair, and Mr. Bill Mackey. So it's either the will of the board that he fill that position. For the purpose of having the past chair was to build consistency and some history on that executive committee.
Do we need a motion for that?
I would ask for a motion for that.
So I'll make a motion
Okay, with that.
that Bill Mackey be our pastor.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Okay.
Sorry, that was moved by Linda Stevenson, seconded by Graham Jones.
Yes. Carried unanimously. Linda?
And then I'd like to make a motion on the other two to be elected, since we had two that didn't make it, Joe Preston and Ed.
Okay, we have a seconder on that? Okay, Grant? Anybody want to speak to that at all? Any opinions on that? Okay. Let's take a vote. All in favor? Okay, carried unanimously. Thank you. So we have our executive committee elected. So souvenirs, you're safe. Thank you. Awesome.
Release the
So we miss
souvenirs
you all,
with
right?
thanks. Thank you so much.
Straight now.
Yes.
So can we take 3 minutes and give you word of it?
Yes.
You take the 3 minutes. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks very much, gentlemen. Your leadership was very much appreciated. If it wasn't such an old man, I didn't have to carry me.
Want us to hand it down for you?
I need one of those carts. Two-wheel carts.
Or a backpack or something.
That's right.
How are things going on in London, Elizabeth? You've had some interesting challenges already.
We have. You might still have to.
Yeah, no, I'm using my flip charts.
Yeah, was that the 135?
Strategic planning and
No.
mission statements.
Oh, that's massacre, is that thing up there? Yeah.
I have three uses. One is I'll make transition counselors in 4 meetings. Others had 1 day before.
Yeah, you had a big turnover.
I said some groups had no women, some groups had more right-leaning people.
How do you decide the groups or just?
Oh, 1 through 5, you're
One-
there,
okay,
you're
all
there,
right,
you're not
yeah,
corners.
okay, so what-
Oh, there was no thought, it was just randomly scattered in the corners.
Oh, we weren't like that, we were totally orderly.
Oh, no, what's your trouble? Hey, what do we do next? The middle council, I asked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who hasn't got enough committees? You're picked.
It was just one friend, especially the media is there, and then they're taking pictures of the group too, and one class of their group come to our group, and they're like, what?
Oh, cross over.
Crossover,
Oh.
yeah, 4 crossovers. So, he came over and said, like,
Yeah, that group looks like one fine white.
yeah, it's true.
What part of London do you live in?
I'm in Ward 12, but the White Small area, Highlands, the Landfill.
Right, all the way up.
That's very transient population there.
Very versatile, a lot of,
Yeah, there's a real mix,
It's got a
real
good
mix
mix of
there.
everything.
yeah, so it's like really the residents care about it, I'm like, I think they do it.
Yeah, we don't have a situation.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
So it does
remember.
work, it was gonna be, Stephen Collier originally had it and it got it, so we would have to like.
Well, but it's nice to have like that at the table because Jared was ill. He wasn't able to attend, I don't think he did.
Yeah, so they actually like, how does that work?
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't, I actually don't know why they didn't replace him.
You had
You know.
I think it's where we've had to put George out previously, it was sports under.
Yeah, it's been for a while.
Meetings or 3 months, and scheduled to ask for replacement, and the board would make a move to remove them and ask for replacement.
We were too nice.
So we discussed it, I guess.
Okay,
You don't really want to go to the board unless they ask for
Back in
replacement.
place? Okay, excellent. So, anyone need any more time at all, or okay?
I still think the staff should be singing the anthem of the.
Okay, so let's take a vote on that.
Dean, so I second it.
Hi, how are you?
And so, thank you, staff, by the way, for being here today. It's so nice to see you all and get you all in one place. That's rare, so it's nice to have you here. So, okay, folks, thank you very much for your confidence in my leadership. Hopefully, I don't disappoint, and I look forward to working with Grant. This is going to be a lot of fun. So let's take a look at our agenda here. Everyone's had a chance to take a look and to review it. Any questions at all about it? If not, let's just go right straight through this. So
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just because we are moving into the business portion of it, can we ask for any declarations of community
Oh, sorry,
interest
okay.
at this point?
Any declarations? Grant?
I have to declare I'm able to close session.
Okay, thank you. We do that again, I believe, during the closed session meeting, so. Anything else at all? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, committee appointments. So we've done the executive committee. Conservation Ontario, we're looking for one volunteer who would like to sit in case one of us is not available.
That's correct.
Anybody in particular looking? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, the Source Protection Committee, that's...
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can we just have a motion that the chair and
Okay,
Tia, and then Dennis will
okay,
guide us to
so-
the alternate?
We have a motion for Dennis to be the alternate.
I'll move it.
Second.
Okay, Allison, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. The Source Protection Committee is, we don't need to move
Just,
that.
I would
because
just
that's-
ask that, just so that we're clear, that the motion that the chair and general manager be KCCA's representative of the Lake Erie Region Source Protection Committee. Someone might go move and second.
Motion. Okay, Ralph and Dominique. All in favor? Thank you. And then the Western Fair Association, we have Allison sitting on it right now as a member of the county rep?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we will do, if it's okay with the council, is that we will have Allison sit on behalf of both the county and our organization, which means we need one more person to volunteer.
I move Elizabeth.
Okay. Seconded, okay. Elizabeth, are you okay with that?
I respectfully decline.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I did speak with the Western Association. They, having two representatives is just a call of this board. If you're happy and content with one representative, we can move forward with one representative. You don't need to have.
Are we happy with that, with one rep? We have a motion on that then, please? Bill?
Yeah, make a motion that Allison be a representative.
Okay, and seconded by Grant. All in favor? Perfect, excellent, okay. So we've fulfilled that responsibility. So now let's take a look at our signing officers. We need a motion, recommendation that the signing officers for the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority be, for 2019, be one of the chair or vice chair, and one of the general manager, secretary, treasurer, or assistant manager, supervisor of planning and conservation areas.
I'll move the recommendation.
Okay, Linda, Ralph, second
Yes.
it? Okay, any discussion at all? All in favor? Carried. The next recommendation, borrowing maximum. Oh, sorry. The borrowing maximum for the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority for all expenditures in 2019 be $200,000, and further, that signing officers be authorized to execute the necessary documents in this regard. Bill?
Move that recommendation.
Ralph, second. Any discussion at all? Okay. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Okay, number D, appointment of the auditor, that the firm of Graham Scott Ends be appointed auditors for the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority for 2019. Motion, Dennis, Grant? Any discussion at all? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, appointment of the solicitor. The firm of Little, Inglis, Price, and Ewer, LLP, be appointed solicitors for the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority for 2019.
Move it.
Moved by Linda, seconded by Bill. Any discussion at all? Seeing none, put it to the vote. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. And then we have our proposed meeting dates. They were,
They were circulated on the
Circulated,
the
okay.
news package.
if you noticed, I noted that they're all at 10 o'clock. I know we used to have some at 7 PM instead, but we're at 10. Is there any discussion on that at all before we make a motion? Okay, yep.
Just a question since I do the board. With the 7 o'clock meetings, was that for public to be able, for more availability to the public, or?
I think it was out of respect for those who, I think farm work and land, to tell you the honest goodness truth. The fact that it was easier for them during those summer months to come at night. And that was sort of the understanding anyways. So, is it a problem for you, Grant, at all, or are you
Well,
okay?
I'm self-employed, but,
Right.
I signed up for the job, so.
Like, it's only, meetings are usually under 2 hours. We're usually done by, we will be done by noon, right? And earlier if possible.
Okay with that.
So, besides that, any other discussion at all on that? Because it is important. We want as many people here as possible. Allison?
I just wonder, having an evening meeting, does that increase staff cost?
Usually what we have done in the past is that it would be overtime for staff, and we have a policy of overtime in lieu. It did create problems. Many of our staff come from London, so it does create problems in terms of, you finish work at 4:30, what do you do between that period between 4:30 and the authority meeting starting at 7? So it was nicer having staff availability during the day meetings.
I know, Greg, your comment about having the public participate, I think that is something, I'm not sure that we've heard any comments at all? Staff, do you ever hear from any of the public at all about them not being able to attend their meetings?
Actually, we had pretty good attendance during our day meetings.
Well, and I was gonna say that, but it's one of those things that, I know with my former life as a counselor, that we moved our meetings later in the day to accommodate the public, so I just didn't know whether that was a real concern or not.
I hadn't heard of it personally, just a question.
Okay, great. Any other comments at all? Okay, can we get a mover and seconder for those meeting dates then, please? Bill, Ralph? Any further discussion at all? Okay, all in favor? Perfect. Boy, you guys are agreeable. That's awesome. Okay, so the minutes of the November 21st meeting, you've had a chance to take a look at those.
I'll move them.
Linda's moving them. Any other, Allison seconded them. Any comments at all? Anything needs to be fixed up at all? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Okay, so matters arising out of the minutes, the December, January media report.
Mr. Chair, I don't really have anything to comment on. Hopefully the cross-country trails down at Dan Patterson will get some use now that we have a little bit of snow on the ground. It would be fabulous to have some more. But generally it's been business as usual.
Okay,
We'll just have a motion to receive that media report.
okay. Motion to receive the media report. Okay, Dominique and Dennis. Any other comments at all? It's always nice to see that, by the way. It's great. All in favor? Carried. Okay, our watershed conditions statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I just had a brain malfunction. So, water levels are currently higher than normal throughout the watershed. I had the opportunity to tour the watershed yesterday and just take a look at the conditions. Some ice down in Port Stanley, just very thin, less than 5 centimeters. No concern at this time for any sort of ice jamming. There's very little snow on the ground. There's only about 8 to 12 millimeters of snow water equivalent. So if we were to have a runoff event, it wouldn't contribute too much to a flood condition. We have had a couple of media releases in the last couple of months, usually due to rain events that we've had. We've had quite a few rain events at the end of December. And a lot of windy weather. We can only describe the last couple of weeks of weather has been very unsettled and varied. So far, though, the potential storm surge has been minimal in Port Stanley. And I had an opportunity to attend a water day at Upper Thames in December. It's an opportunity for staff who work with the stream gauge network and doing flood forecasting and monitoring to meet our counterparts with the government and put a face to the name. Sometimes you're talking to them and having to do some repairs, and gives us all an opportunity to work together and see what's working and what isn't working and what we can improve and new technologies. So it's a good opportunity.
Thanks, Jennifer. Any questions at all, Jennifer? Linda?
Just with the water being as high as it is, you got any areas of concern that you're keeping a close eye on? They're still calling for a little bit of rain this week. I thought it'd be all snow, but it sounds like it might be raining. Any areas of concern?
Mr. Chair, to Linda, not at this time. The water levels are pretty normal for this time. They're just slightly higher than normal. There's lots of capacity for taking in that extra rain, but we're always keeping an eye on it. So.
I have a question for you. So you deal in data and facts every day, but you also have a crystal ball in your desk drawer?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so what's the crystal ball telling us?
So Environment Canada Long Range Forecast, they do a 3-month forecast every month. They look at the next 3 months. They're saying expect above normal temperatures and precipitations for the southwest region. Which is kind of nice, a little bit warmer, and we don't have a deep freeze like we had last winter. At this time, it could change. But the above normal precipitation, that's due to lake effect. So we could have lake effect snow, we could have this freezing drizzle stuff that was going on. So it's always changing.
Right. Okay. Any other questions at all? Okay, I need a motion to receive this for information. Ralph and Linda, all in favor? Great. Thanks, Jennifer. And our audit engagement letters.
Mr. Chair, those were just included as standard operating procedures, and I'm just asking for permission to execute them.
Okay, so we're looking for that motion to receive and execute. Okay, from Grant and Elizabeth. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so we have some correspondence to note. A letter from Forest Gene Conservation Association about the tree seed management in Ontario. A letter from Conservation Ontario to the Honourable Rod Phillips. And a letter from Conservation Ontario to the Honourable Rod Phillips. One about the approval of the administrative bylaws, and one the special audit of the KCCA. Just for the new councillors, can you tell us about the administrative bylaws and what that's all about?
So the administrative bylaws were a requirement of the updates as a result of the Bill 139, the updates to the Conservation Authorities Act. One of the things coming out of that was requesting that all CAs update their administrative bylaws to take into account better government, better transparency and consistency throughout the 36 conservation authorities in Ontario. Conservation Ontario, in consultation with the ministry, developed those templates, and we were required to adopt new administrative bylaws by December of last year. So the results of the very thorough election that we had today was the results of those updates to our bylaws. So it was great.
Excitement at the CA. Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Any questions about that at all? It's nice. So everyone consistently, every CA has a set of bylaws that have been perfect. Excellent. Okay. I guess what we need is to simply have a motion for information for those 3 letters. We see no other questions about them at all. Allison and Elizabeth? All in favor? Thank you. Okay, we're down to new business. We're just flying here. So let's look at the draft 2019 budget overview.
So, Mr. Chair, as members will see, there was a variety of documentation forwarded out in your advance package with regards to the 2019 budget. Other than the orientation session that you all attended, this is kind of your first in-depth look at the budget. So what I wanted to do today is kind of take you through an overview presentation of that budget. And so with the permission of the chair, I'd like to do that and take you through kind of the recommendations that I'm looking for from the board today on the budget. So there's a little bit of lag in our budget process this year, mainly because of the municipal election and the changeover, and quite a significant change at the board, at our board specifically. But here we are on January 16th, and just kind of to take you through your first 60 days as members of the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority Board. We have our first meeting, we've done our election of officers, and what I'd like to do is just give an overarching budget presentation today. On February 6th, this tends to be kind of your last look, your last in-depth look at the budget. We'll have the auditor present draft 2018 statements for your review. And the budget will be represented with the 2018 actuals, and it's kind of a last look to finalize the budget and compare it against the actuals for 2018. All with the mind that our annual general meeting is happening on February 20th. Where we will actually approve the budget and the levy at that time. So I'll try to give you as much as I can an overview of the budget today. We'll take a final look at the budget with actuals on February 6th with the goal of moving towards budget approval and levy approval on February 20th. So I'm looking basically in terms of the budget, 2019 budget today, what I'm looking for is three considerations for you. One is that the position of Forest and Lands Technician be immediately posted as a one-year contract. That we approve an application to the Water and Erosion Control Infrastructure Program for a Dalewood Dam project. And that the notice of meeting for Conservation Authority levy approval be circulated. And what I'm proposing is I'll kind of take you through that overview, and we'll pause at certain points to consider those recommendations. So as mentioned in the orientation session, 2019 is the last year of a four-year budget. We started a four-year budget process basically led by the City of London to begin planning. And so this board embraced that and looked at a four-year budget horizon. The work plans for 2019 presented and vetted with the Board of Directors throughout 2018, I think represents an achievable work plan with available funds. So we're not trying to overreach, we're not trying to do a massive expansion of our programs and services. And each of those work plans were basically overviewed in your orientation manual as well, so you can refer back to them as needed for each one of the departments. We're looking in 2019 of an increase in municipal levy of $63,933 over 2018. And just for some historical perspective, the average levy increase since 2010 has been 3.97%.
Sorry, what was the percentage increase this year?
Percentage increase this year is 7%. Historically, the average has been 3.9.
May I ask why?
Why they levy?
Why it's up quite so much, so you've almost doubled it, right?
Over the average.
Right, over the average. So I'll go into detail on the reasons why.
Okay.
So the majority of that levy increase, over 45%, is going to support the GIS IT supervisor position. So over the last 4 years, we've been phasing in that position, moving it from a completely self-funded position, going out and finding grants and fundraising, to being supported by the municipal levy. The other component of the 7% increase is there's a 2% cost of living increase that was applied to the salary ranges, and it also incorporates moving staff through their ranges. We still have some staff moving through their grids. We also looked at introducing the Forest and Lands Resource Technician position, and we'll go into further detail on that as well. Continuing the Environmental Youth Corps, which was again a service that began in 2018 through funding grants. Looking at starting a pilot camera installation to monitor floodwater, so looking at 1 or 2 cameras that can be installed at key locations throughout the watershed to decrease the amount of staff time that's spent driving around the watershed looking at floodwaters progressing. Also the purchase of a trail counter to track trail usage, and capital investment. One of the things to keep in mind is the categories that are coming up in blue. Those are basically self-funded. So the Forest and Lands Resource Technician does not impact the municipal levy. The Environmental Youth Corps does not impact the municipal levy, and the capital investment will not impact the municipal levy. So the majority of that 7% increase, so that $63,000 that we're looking at, is part of that 4-year budget plan to phase in that GIS IT supervisor position without having them completely self-funded. So what the increase looks like to your specific member municipalities, the detailed levy sheet was part of your advanced package. But what we have here is the increase, the 2019 increase spelled out for each member municipality. As well, in your advanced package was what I call the executive summary, or kind of the elevator summary of the budget, with specific notes for your specific member municipality as well. So in terms of proposed revenue, you can see that even with the 7% increase in municipal levy, we're still, levy only constitutes 33% of our revenue, our total revenue at the authority. The majority of our revenue is self-generated, coming from user fees, fundraising grants. And this year we're looking at a 11% drawdown on the reserves as well to support our programs and services. In terms of, this is an overview of those revenues. You can see the 7% increase in municipal levy. Also increases in what we expect to bring in from our campgrounds, which are our main revenue generating departments. And an increase in the transfer from reserves, mainly to support that forest and lands technician and our tree planting programs. The big thing that we're struggling with this year is that there's a number of grants that we've had over the past 4 or 5 years in terms of Ontario Power Generation, GLASI, COA funding, and those are drawing to an end in 2019.
Elizabeth, on the Minister of Natural Resources, you have word from them that the money you get from them will not change this year?
I don't expect it to change. It hasn't changed since the 90s. And with the way the government is looking in terms of taking line-by-line looks at every one of the ministries, I don't expect that number would change.
And in your 4-year plan, are we planning for any change from the Ontario government?
No. In my opinion, I think I've been with the authority for almost 16 years now, and that is just a general topic of discussion as to how do we get more money from the province. And the province has never come together with more money in those 16 years.
I'm not expecting more.
No, I don't expect more. I think that that's why I'm a big advocate of the conservation authorities looking at a different way of doing business. I mean, that's what I've been pushing for since my time here at the authority. How can we share services amongst the CAs? How can we share staff? Perhaps more of a regional perspective on a lot of our things. I'm a big believer that source water protection regions in which Grand, Long Point, Catfish, and Kettle work together to deliver that program and share services back and forth. I think that's the new way that we have to look at things. And with this board, I'd like to explore that further as part of our next 4-year planning cycle that will begin after this year, and have those types of discussions with you and with neighboring CAs.
I would love that.
Yeah.
I have this fear of what the
I think if we
Ontario
don't,
government will balance its budget.
I think if we don't start looking at those things ourselves, then it's going to be mandated for us. And I'd rather be proactive and look at it ourselves.
Linda, sorry.
Through the chair, a question was asked to me of council members the other night is how you got to how much you're charging each municipality for their tax levy. Is it done on a percentage basis? Is it done by how many square kilometers we take in? How's that
And
done?
so if you look at your actual levy sheet, it's how much of your municipality is within our watershed, and the population that's in that watershed would dictate your percentage of that levy. So it's an average levy increase, 7% is an average levy increase. If you look at the actual increase to each individual member municipality, for instance, Malahides might not actually be the full 7% of what it was last year, but it really depends on your modified CDA, your property, how much percentage is it actually in the watershed. So it's an average levy increase of 7% shared by those member municipalities. But it very much depends on what percentage of your municipality is in the watershed.
Now, I certainly advocate that it's money well spent, so don't get me wrong, but certainly there was concern with the amount that had gone up. And I said that wasn't unusual. We had a lot of new council members, and they were questioning, why so much.
Sure.
And I said, it's not totally unusual from time to time for it to increase the way it did.
Yeah, and if you look with, almost half of it going to the GIS IT supervisor position, if you look at it that way, we're within range of that average levy increase over the last 4 years. So after we have this increase, it's not my expectation, or it's not what I'm working towards, that we would see a 7%, 8%, 9% increase in the next 4 years. It's actually the reverse. With shared services and things like that, it's my goal to get that levy down within the next 4 years. And I think that's what we as a board will have to work for in terms of our next 4-year budget plan.
And I know we've talked about that in our capital plan as to the sharing of services, but where I think this board can support you in the way of recommendations and carrying those initiatives forward, it would be helpful.
Yeah.
So that it's clear. I wouldn't mind seeing it contained in the minutes, so that way everyone understands that we're trying to achieve some certain goals.
Right.
And that may be the sharing of some services.
So again, I really concentrate on, I think the budget reflects an achievable work plan with available funds. In terms of expenditures, again, we have salary pressures in terms of regular increases, WSIB, OMERS, CPP, all increasing. But I think one significant thing when you look at the consolidated numbers like this, there is increased monitoring costs. And that's just reflective of increases to service providers, and Jen's working very diligently to contain those and looking at competitors to bring those prices down, but we do expect the prices to increase in 2019. And then again, there's a majority of the expenditures that we're actually looking at beyond the GIS IT supervisor position, we've been able to go out and find funding for. So the GIS IT supervisor, again, began in 2014, entirely self-funded. The past board saw the value in that position. They didn't want to lose the initial investment that those funding programs provided in terms of the acquisition of the drones and things of that nature, and wanted to have that ability and have that resource at the authority. What the position has built in at the authority is now we used to contract out all our IT, now we can handle it in-house, which is a cost savings. With Cliff's capabilities, we're able to manage our data better. So we're moving towards being able to share what information we have with our member municipalities, as well as the public in a more meaningful way. Just for instance, our monitoring data, we used to have an Excel spreadsheet. And if you've ever tried to get meaningful data from an Excel spreadsheet and share it meaningfully, it can be a challenge. And we're moving that data to databases that we can generate maps from and easily search that information to share with both our member municipalities and the public. So even in 2019, with the increase that we're looking at, I still think there's a business case to say that part of that position can be self-funded. funded, and moving forward, we're looking at generating $25,000 in self-funding to support that position. I think that's an achievable goal, and in 2019, we'll be using $17,000 from our wage subsidy reserve to support that position as well. That's really why the wage subsidy reserve was created, is that we do have a number of positions at the authority that look towards self-funding, and we wanted to make sure in the years where funding is lean, that we've put money aside to make sure that those positions can continue. All the funds that go into that wage subsidy reserve are self-funded, so it's not municipal levy that's going into that wage subsidy reserve. Salaries, again, we're looking at 2% cost of living increase to all the salary ranges. I think that that's, again, a comparable target. My understanding is Catfish is, in their budget, they're putting out 2.2%, and Long Point had just approved this week a 1.75% cost of living increase.
Grant, question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Through you to Elizabeth. So the GIS, I think I read someplace where you are shopping GIS out to another conservation authority or planning to.
Yeah.
So what are the, as far as Catfish or Lower Thames, there are opportunities there to do that?
Yes, so working right now on a project for Long Point Region Conservation Authority, and since 2014, we've really pitched that to them to be offering those services to them, and I think that that's part of that $25,000 that we can count on moving forward to support those positions among other projects with those CAs. I think moving forward, there's more that can be done, and certainly just this past week, Cliff showcased his service capabilities to the city of St. Thomas, just to ensure that we're not duplicating efforts that we've built up. Basically, he's built a drone operation here, and if we can share that with our member municipalities, that would be great.
Yes.
With regards to the water monitoring cameras, obviously there's a cost saving to the staff not having to drive down and look. So is there an outcome where that money is, we receive benefit instead of it being a cost? So as far as the time saving for staff, is there a spot where we're actually saving money?
Yeah, I don't think it's a salary saving so much as it's, we have overtime in lieu of, so it would be the staff time spent out there, as well as a safety aspect of it as well. So it never floods during the daytime, ever. It's usually at 3 in the morning as a rule, and so that creates a certain amount of hazard, and we have to make sure that no one's working alone. So 2 people are basically dispatched to do that running around. So we're hoping to pilot the program this year. We're only looking at basically $1,000 to try to see how that works. And then bringing it back to board to see if we want to expand it to the full watershed. So it wouldn't be like a cost savings that we can take from there to put somewhere else. It's more in terms of staff safety and more effective use of staff time. The acquiring the trail counter, you see in the budget was estimated at $3,000. That device is $3,000, but it can be transferable to each trail, which is something we've not been able to do before. So we've tried to track data, like how many people are using our trails, at what time of day are they using our trails, and by what means are they using our trails.
Dominic, you have a question there.
Oh, sorry.
Well, that's okay, I think. I was going to go back through, Mr. Chair, to the GIS position.
Okay.
That's okay?
Mm-hmm.
So it was mentioned during the orientation that the percentage was about 20% of the time being spent on GIS. Maybe 40% was actually on software development and 40% in IT. So I'm trying to, on the IT side, trying to compare that to what your cost used to be when you used to contract out, to see if there, what is the actual cost saving. I question the software development. I think it's really cool, but at a time when all municipalities we've all received letters saying that we will have to do with less. So I question whether that's absolutely necessary and adds value. And then on the GIS portion, then I, to your point, wonder about opportunities for sharing, because it feels like there are GIS positions, you know, at the county level, at the municipal level, and ultimately, we're all looking at the same, we're all mapping the same area. So is that something that we absolutely need to take on at the authority, or is there data we could be actually getting from somewhere else? So that overall position, I think, needs to be looked at.
Okay, lots of elements there. And so I'll try to highlight, and if I miss some, let me know. In terms of the software development, I think where Cliff has basically revolutionized our work here at the authority is through open source software. And without his expertise, we wouldn't be able to tap into that. So what we're seeing right now, even in terms of our PDF software. So lots of the software companies are moving to, what would I call it, like a fee-based. So it used to be subscription-based. So it used to be we could get Adobe Acrobat, we'd pay $300, we'd have that for 4, 5, 10 years if we were comfortable operating from that issue. But now what we're just discussing as part of this budget is Adobe has gone to a subscription service. It's outside of our budget capabilities, but with Cliff's help, in terms of looking at open source, we can go out and he can do the background research and find us those open source ones where we're not paying for those yearly subscriptions. And PDF, the PDF one is a very simplistic look, but in terms of his overall capabilities, he's pitching that. That was one of the pitches to the city of St. Thomas and to the neighboring CAs, is to move away from these subscription-based software clients when we have the capability to search out these open software, open source capabilities as well. In terms of duplication, where Cliff's expertise is in the drones. I don't think any of our member municipalities have built up the drone program in the way that Cliff has. And that the drone capability is a benefit to here at the authority in terms of change detection over time. So the ability to look at aerial photography and things of that nature, fly a specific area, and be able to denote things like forest cover change, erosion change. Those capabilities don't exist at our member municipalities, and that's what we would be looking at sharing with our member municipalities, so we're not duplicating those efforts in the same way that it doesn't exist at the other CAs. So we have other CAs in the province actually visiting Cliff and gaining information and gleaning his knowledge that he's been able to build up over the last 4 years, and basically tying into his expertise to look at that. So even the Toronto region has come down and asked for those expertise. So I don't see that as a duplication. Furthermore, in terms of the data that we're looking at, yes, everyone has access to the same aerial photography, but again, Cliff's expertise are looking at those aerial photographies and changing it into meaningful data on a much more cost-effective basis. So instead of each one of Catfish Creek and Long Point having to go out and create their own DEMs, Cliff was able to do that for them rather than each one of us going out and contacting a contractor to do that. And those are the types of services, again, that expertise in terms of taking that raw data and making it into a meaningful product that everyone can use is the expertise that lies in this position here at the authority, which wouldn't necessarily be at your member municipality or at the other CAs. And so one of the purposes of sitting down with the city of St. Thomas is to share that information so that they don't get out ahead of us. So that we can say, we have this capability, how could you use it in your shop, and can we contribute to that information, basically transfer of knowledge, and that it's starting here. So I don't see it as a duplication. In terms of the IT support, I can pull those numbers for you. If you're looking at the historical elements of the full budget that was in your package, I think it's under Department 112 IT Service Agreement. You'll see those numbers, I believe, hopefully if my memory's good, you'll see those numbers drop from from 2014 to hopefully 2018, where we used to actually have to look at an outside consulting firm to come in and do those types of services. And I really, the cost savings alone, I think might be in the element of $4,000 to $6,000 that was looking at. But in terms of the efficiency of having someone in-house to deal with those types of concern, those types of elements are even greater. To have someone in-house, as well as just to have the knowledge in-house as well. What the authority was operating on before was, as we always do, we're one-person departments, but we're also wearing several hats. So for instance, when I started at the authority, I was the public relations supervisor, but that meant that I handled the IT as well, because no one else that seemed to kind of fall under PR at the time. And I was willing to take it on. So having a dedicated person that's looking at overall those things. The only other thing I would mention about software development is, I wouldn't necessarily call it software development, but application development. And that's really changed, beginning to change the way the staff is able to work. So for hazard tree identification, Cliff's been able to develop an application where the guys can go out, GPS those hazard trees, and be able to knowingly come back once it frees up and say, oh yes, that's exactly the tree that we're taking down, rather than going out and wandering around the woods and guessing now that the tree covers off which one of those trees was the hazard tree or the deserted tree. With Cliff's help, we've been able to put our seasonal camper application online. We wouldn't have been able to do that with our own capabilities. It would have been a contract out. You'll see later in the report with the dam hazard classification that we're looking at, that specific project would have been in the realms of $60,000 to $70,000, but we're able to do a lot of the information gathering and the technical information gathering with Cliff's help, so he can go out and do the bathymetrics of the Deola Dam. He can go out and assess the bridge openings and covering, the heights of the bridges, the heights of the culvert opening. He can do that, whereas we would have had to contract that out again. So there's another, it's not open in the budget, but there's another really great example of cost savings that we now have available to us. As well as when we were speaking with the city of St. Thomas, that's valuable data that they can put into their system and inform their decisions moving forward as well. I hope I caught all of those.
But that's really good information, Elizabeth. That's excellent. I think it informs us.
So if I may add, Mr. Chair, that I think in general, when proposing something like that, to show the consequence of this is what the reality looks like with this position, and this is the reality without.
Sure.
So that we would have concrete numbers to say, well, IT in-house, IT outsourced.
Sure.
So that way it's much more tangible and saves you a long presentation. So it was very thorough. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. The other element that's within the 2019 budget is in 2019 we don't have the Ontario Power Generation grant. We've worked for a number of years with Ontario Power Generation to support our tree planting program. There is no Ontario Power Generation grant in 2019. There is going to be a call for proposals, and staff are working towards that. But again, we'll be counting on our reserves to continue with that base program of 50,000 trees. Some initiatives that don't hit the municipal levy, but I think are worth mentioning. The Elgin St. Thomas Community Foundation, we've been able to secure $9,000 from them to continue the Environmental Youth Corps in 2019, and I believe staff updated you on that program in the orientation session. So great, again, transfer of knowledge to the younger generation and an ability of staff to go out there and do it outside of the municipal levy. One of the elements that I was seeking recommendation from you today on was the Forest and Lands Technician proposal. So the control of invasive species throughout the watershed is a concern, and we're not just talking Phragmites. There's a number of elements out there of concern: buckthorn, Manitoba maple, giant ragweed. The unfortunate thing is we have no inventory of those invasive species on our property and no management plan. They do choke out native biodiversity, impacting society, human health, and economy. And staff have, again, over the last couple of years, tried to piecemeal this together with the staff time, this downtime that staff have, or with available seasonal staff that we get on through other funding proposals. But what happens with invasive species, and this is a good example, I think Jeff and Betsy looked at this in the orientation session as well, is that we tried to tackle Phragmites at Lake Whitaker in August of 2017. You can see this young gentleman with his brute strength went out there and took down all of that Phragmites, and by September 25th you can see how it's proliferating up again. So in the fight against Phragmites, just as an example, but all invasive species, it does take a concerted effort and a multi-year effort, and so it's something that we need to be planning for. So the proposal that I basically took to the Kettle Creek Environmental Trust, which is again a separate board, separate fundraising agency outside of the authority. What I proposed to them is that, the authority could hire a forest and lands technician, inventory and assess invasive species, develop a strategy for control and removal, and implement and lead in outreach and education. That's what the forest and lands technician would do. As a value add, the position in terms of the authority's perspective would provide much needed resource assistance to the tree planting, stewardship, and environmental significant areas. So we struggle constantly with acquiring staff and funding dollars for seasonal staff as well. And so this position would have those dual efforts. What I was able to confirm before, just at the end of 2018, is that Kettle Creek Environmental Trust has come forward with $50,000 over the next 3 years to support this idea and to support this position specifically. The Elgin St. Thomas Community Foundation also heard about the proposal and has committed $7,000 in 2019 to this position. So in terms of the 2019 budget, there's no municipal levy going towards this position. I'm proposing that the rest of the position be supported from reserves of a commitment of $17,879 in 2019. Again, $10,000 coming from the wage subsidy reserve and $7,000 from the conservation lands reserve. The conservation lands reserve was specifically set up in 2018 for this specific type of work with revenue that was generated from a logging operation. So we did a logging pilot in 2018. It netted $30,000 in revenue, and it was set aside for lands management and specific to invasive species control as well. So I'm not asking for a commitment to the 3-year proposal. I'm just looking for a commitment from the board for 2019 with the caveat that I've secured again, basically $50,000 from the KCCA over 3 years, $7,000 from the Community Foundation, and $17,000 coming from the reserves. I think it's very likely that I'd be able to secure an employment grant for this type of position. There's lots of green jobs initiatives out there. This would speak to it very well. What I am asking you for today is that I would have the ability, before the budget is finally approved in February, to post this position so we could get it kick-started. The benefits is, again, not impacting the municipal levy, so if you decide to make any changes to that, it wouldn't impact this position. And I'm just, the ability to go out in January to look for employment grants increases my chances of securing one. And third, it also optimizes my opportunity to find an ideal candidate for this position as well. So that is one of the motions that I would be looking at for you to entertain today. I'm open to questions.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Elizabeth, so with the technician's experience, studies that person may take on, is it going to be information that's passed on to the municipalities? Because obviously, every municipality is struggling with, the most prevalent is phragmites, or the most visible, I should say. With a lot of varying opinions of how to control it, from don't do anything to spray, but obviously for myself and myself, I see a benefit from actually having good data that can justify the cost of our own municipality doing roadside, for the most part, is the biggest problem.
Thank you, Grant. I think there's part of the business plan in terms of looking at a 3-year. You see the other funding down there. For the initial year, I've been able to secure that from the Community Foundation. But I think moving forward, there's definitely benefit to the larger county-wide look at invasive species, or municipal-wide. I think there's a buy-in that hopefully can be expected from the member municipalities as well as landowners to help try to combat this. One of the benefits of the CAs is that they're committed under the Pesticide Act to apply pesticide for purposes of managing these products, where it's much more cumbersome for a landowner to take it on themselves, or even a member municipality. So I think that's a great buy-in for member municipalities, and rather than putting it directly into the municipal levy, the member municipalities themselves can decide whether or not to work with the CA to tackle some of these problems in their own municipalities. But certainly also sharing the information in terms of inventory, outreach, and education on these varieties would be part of that as well.
So the inventory, is it just for property within the Conservation Authority, or is it all the municipalities?
I think initially, we don't know how big this is going to be. I think initially we'd want to look at our own properties in the initial year, and then reevaluate it with this board in terms of how do we want to grow this? Do we want to grow this? Is there interest in the member municipalities in terms of growing this? But I think initially, I always say I want to walk the walk. So the city of St. Thomas is very much committed to being frag-free. And I think as a conservation authority, I want to be able to do the same on our properties, and we can't do it without some staff support to getting it done.
Any other questions around?
So I don't know if you want to pause and consider that recommendation now, or we can look at the end of the budget presentation.
Why don't we go right to the end, and then we can
Okay.
go from there.
I've anticipated one of the questions might be from members, well, what do the reserves look like? You're drawing them down, are they healthy? How much of the reserve are you looking at? So in terms of the 2019 budget, we'd be looking for a drawdown of the legal reserve of $30,000, just anticipating legal expenses related to some outstanding cases in the Section 28 regulation. The sub-watershed reserve, this is where we'll draw on to support the tree planting program in absence of the OPG contract in 2019. Again, that's worst case scenarios. In terms of making that drawdown, we'll look at other funding proposals where we can to avoid drawing that down. The wage subsidy reserve is looking at a drawdown of about $40,000. Again, roughly $3,600 to support seasonal staff support in the Department 115, $10,000 to support the forest and lands technician position that we just talked about. And then there's still some funds that would go towards supporting the stewardship program and the GIS IT supervisor wages as well. And those are the two main positions still at the authority that do fundraise for a certain portion of their positions. This is where I talked about earlier, the benefits of having that kind of safety net in that reserve if they're not successful in 1 year, going out and doing as much fundraising as they can. So we always expect that 10,000 draw, 15,000 draw to be less, but again, those are the worst case scenarios there. The lands reserve we just talked about was created in 2018. There's $30,000 in there. We're looking at drawing down about $7,000 to support the forest and lands technician position. And the stewardship reserve, looking at a drawdown to support the Cloud Creek Clean Water Initiative for a total draw of $125,000. If you look at the reserve sheet that was out included in your advanced packages. You can see what I anticipate the reserves to be at the end of December 31st of 2018 if we did all the drawdowns that we expected, and then what I expected it to see at the end of 2019. What I'll be able to bring to you at the February 6th meeting is a better projection of how did we end up at the end of 2018, so you have a better comfort level. Is this a reasonable drawdown on those reserves? In terms, I just wanted to touch on the capital aspect of the budget as well. I think we mentioned it in the orientation session, but we do look at our capital investment really being funded through our capital reserves that are in turn are contributed to from our campground revenue. So it's kind of we do as much as we can to create revenue in our campgrounds, put it into our capital reserves, and reinvest it into the capital investment. So the reserves are supported with revenue from the campgrounds, and based on our 5-year capital projections, we need to be putting away at least $30,000 to support those 5-year projections moving out. Over the last couple of years, we've had some major investments in our capital, and one of the reasons we look to the campgrounds to really support our capital infrastructure is that they're the biggest capital infrastructure that we have. And so this is an example of a washroom at Lake Whitaker. You can see various disrepair, and we restored it in 2018. The Dalewood Pool was also a recent project. I believe it was conducted in 2014, and so we refurbished it as well. And the pool, I can't stress enough how much a pool is integral to a campground. Similarly, the Dalewood Gatehouse again was undertaken. So this was the Dalewood Gatehouse entry before work began, and then we invested in a new gatehouse. You can see better access and entry into the campground, and overall a better and more safe building than the shack that we had before. So the staff do undertake a 5-year kind of, we talked about crystal balls earlier, trying to look 5 years out in terms of our capital plan. We rely on different strategies to try to determine what should be coming up in terms of our capital investment. We have a vehicle replacement strategy that looks at things much more than when did we purchase this vehicle and when is its book end of life. We look at how much mileage what is it being used for, what are its operating costs, and so that all goes into determining when we would replace it. We very much look at our capital in terms of resources directed to their needs, and then at the very last, resources directed to revenue generation or efficiencies. So again, the 5-year kind of capital list was included in your advanced packages. What I wanted to focus today on specifically is the costs or the expenditures that we had forecasted for 2019. You can see a total investment in infrastructure of $181,000 in 2019. And again, all of these funds would be coming from our capital reserves. So Lake Whitaker, we did an audit of the Lake Whitaker pool in 2017, and there was a number of deficiencies identified. And we've been able to kind of prioritize those deficiencies. So we began in 2018 and undertook a mechanical replacement at the pool. The last element that is very much needed is the tile and plastering of the pool is recommended to be replaced as well. And that was identified in that audit. The budget for that project is $42,000. The septic repair at the administration building. So for those returning members, you will remember that we did a building assessment, was conducted in 2018. And the goal behind that building assessment was really to look at the building, and the board was interested in looking at a more publicly accessible boardroom with a little bit more room and a publicly accessible washroom at the administration building. So we did a whole building assessment. which I want to dedicate a certain amount of time with the new board members to bring you up to speed. We got the report at the end of December, and so I think you deserve the right to kind of look at that report in more detail before informing your budget, your capital budget planning moving forward. But one of the things that came out of that assessment is that our septic system is basically failing or needs some attention to. So we'll present the building assessment report fully at a later date, but there were concerns with the septic systems have been identified and that the current system cannot properly handle current use requirements. So the budget around repairing that septic system, and on the left you can see that's an actual picture of the septic system right now, basically tree roots going into that and the work that they're proposing. So the budget for that is $11,000 this year, and I would say much needed. Other elements of the capital budget, we would be recommending the purchase of a small tractor for Dalewood. So currently the authority has 2 tractors. One is stationed at Lake Whitaker and one is stationed here at the Buck office. The Massey tractor at the Buck office is shared between the Buck, Dalewood Conservation Area, and the tree planting. And if you can imagine, all of those departments are busy at the exact same time every year. So spring is a mad rush to see who can get the tractor first. The Dalewood tractor is required for road work, soil material replacement, and again, often at the same peak time as others. So it's suggested that a small utility tractor at Dalewood would mean equipment is available when required and would extend the life expectancy of our existing tractor at Buck. So we wouldn't be basically driving it over to Dalewood every time it's required.
Bill, you had a question?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Elizabeth, just back to the septic, are we looking at a total replacement or repair or?
No, so sorry, I left my notes. We're just looking at the, pardon? You can answer that.
I was just going to say issue up there. So primary, it deals with some of the field tiles are clogged with roots. So the proposal is to disconnect and abandon those ones. They figured rather than the time spent trying to clean them out, it's better to put in new tile, field tile of that portion, but also adding those, if you're what they call them, there's a type of cover to prevent the roots to get into the new system. So it would be a replacement of a portion of the field bed.
So what we're doing will jive with what we're proposing for the addition. It's not money spent and then finding out later that, oh, we should have done something different because we're proposing.
I don't know if I want me to continue with that. From my understanding, this needs to be done to meet the current needs of this building because the half of the field bed tile is clogged, not being occupied. Regardless of if the board considers additions or more capacity, it's going to either require a new system or a separate system for if that was the scenario for whatever the add-on was. So, but this would be, it's needed to meet the current capacity of the current use of the building.
So we're looking at a small tractor purchase for Dalewood Conservation Area. The budget for that is $22,000. A dump trailer is also proposed. Currently, the authority only has flatbed trailers used for floating equipment. It's not very conducive to moving materials. The acquisition of a dump trailer would also negate hiring outside contractors to perform related tasks. Pull behind bush hog, we do have contractual obligations at Kirk Cousins Management Area. Requires the removal of tall shrubbery debris. And what staff are finding is that we're not able to access those areas with the equipment that we have now. So this small pull behind bush hog would also mean that we would be able to fulfill our contractual obligations there, but there's also be a benefit to our other significant areas with this type of equipment, and the ability for the authority to undertake more tall grass prairie plantings that require the cutting of that tall grass prairie from time to time for management.
Dennis, question?
The contractual obligations, what is the contract and who is that with? Or
I'll let Joe answer that.
Sure, so at Kirk Cousins Management Area, I spoke a little bit about it with the orientation. This is the property just behind Regina Monday School of London. Part of the land, the front entrance land where we have parking and access is actually owned by Chorus Entertainment. We own the woodlots and the natural features in behind. So we have a management agreement together to operate in a conservation area there. Part of the problem is there's a small portion of the field where they have FM towers on the corner of Scotland Drive and Wellington Road. And I guess there's cables that feed underground the equal distance of the height of the tower, so they cross over into the land that we manage. And their concern is large rooty material damaging those cables underground. So the contract is we have to keep that vegetation controlled and cut down. So what we typically do is once or twice a year we mow it. But what's happened over the years, there's also an overflow channel of one of the wetlands that was relatively wet, and we were having a hard time getting cutting equipment close enough to cut it, and it kind of got out of control. So it was something like this style of attachment, which I believe is more for like an ATV Rhino style equipment, so we can get into more remote places where a tractor couldn't, and we can offset those cutting. So it's really just keeping that vegetation cut down to avoid large woody debris and damaging cables.
Another purchase in 2019 is a truck. So the fleet is evaluated in accordance with that vehicle replacement strategy, and again, evaluates useful life based on maintenance records. We have a current fleet of 7 vehicles. One vehicle through the vehicle replacement strategy was identified as needing replacement, and that's a 2004 F-150. You can see it's the blue one at the left of the screen. However, staff are proposing to keep that F-150 until maintenance exceeds operating budget thresholds. It's a good truck to have in terms of for available to our seasonal staff, and a good truck to have available for the, if you guys agree to, the Forest and Lands Resource Technician to have an extra truck available. So we would proceed with the purchase of a crossover SUV to provide benefit to both office and field staff this year, that keep that F-150 as a backup and as a seasonal staff vehicle until it's not useful anymore, or the operating costs exceed budget thresholds. Pooled assets, in each capital budget, I denote $10,000, and that's for any signs, picnic tables, and roadways repairs that we need within a given year, as well as there's a placeholder for communication technology budget of $8,000, and this just ensures that our workstations and peripheral placements to avoid large computer purchase in a single year. So that's another benefit of having Cliff on board. He's constantly, instead of going out and buying everyone a new computer every 4 or 5 years, we're trying to cycle them through so that we're not doing a huge computer and server purchase in 1 year. It's 1 or 2 computers each year as the need arises. The last element of the capital budget that I wanted to talk to specifically about today was the Dalewood Dam Hazard Potential Classification. The budget for this project is $50,000. So Riggs Engineering has recommended a hazard potential classification, and that basically came out of some of the work that Riggs was doing in terms of oversight of the bridge repair at the Dalewood Dam. What a hazard potential classification is it basically looks at a dam burst of the dam. It's something that should be conducted as a best management practices. The province recommends really every 10 years or any time that you've had a significant change either upstream or downstream of the dam. So we would, again, on Riggs Engineering recommendation that hazard potential classification be done, is that staff are proposing to do it in 2018. Staff, as I mentioned earlier, through Cliff's capabilities, can do a lot of the in-house processing tasks, so topographical surveys, bathymetrics. The other funding that we have availability to undertake in this project would be through the Water Erosion Control Infrastructure Grant application. So this is money that the province does set aside on a yearly basis. We've been told that hopefully there's still $5 million in that pot across the province. The call for proposals for the wiki. Funding usually happens in February, and so I want the ability to be able to participate in that call and pitch this project to the province. If successful, we would be eligible for 50% of that fund, of that $50,000 cost. So that was another motion that I was hoping for your consideration today, is that staff submit an application for the Dalewood Dam Hazard Potential Classification and Dam Operation Project. Again, the historical project call for proposals is in February, and so we would be submitting the application that we have the intentions of doing this project, but bringing a full report back to the board in terms of any RFP results would be brought back to the board for their consideration. And finally, in terms of recommendations that I'm looking for today, we do have to provide notice to our member municipalities of our annual general meeting and our consideration of our budget and levy approval. That has to be provided 30 days in advance of that meeting. So you saw the sample letter in your draft packages. What I'm proposing is that letter, or I'm asking your permission to execute that letter and advise your member municipalities of our budget approval. So again, we're not looking at any budget approval today. That's kind of a really broad perspective of it. As I mentioned in the orientation session, I'm open to sitting down with each one of you and taking a closer look at the budget or answering any questions that you may have of the budget. Specifically, I'd love to have those questions or answers done by the end of January so that I can inform your next view of the budget, which will be February 6th. And again, over the next couple of weeks, what I'm doing is looking at the 2018 actuals and adding those into the budget numbers that you saw in your package so that you can look at each of the historical performances in those departments as well as have the 2018 actuals beside you. So in terms of today, I'm looking for permission to post that forest and lands technician immediately. Again, no impact to the municipal levy for 2019, supporting it through fundraising and reserves. That the authority approve an application to the Water and Erosion Control Infrastructure Program for funding for the Dalewood Dam Hazard Potential Classification for a total project cost of $50,000, and that the notice of the meeting for Conservation Authority levy approval be circulated.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Any other questions at all? It was a great presentation, very informative. Okay, so we have three motions here, three recommendations. We can do them separately if you wish.
Yes.
Okay, so the first recommendation, that the position of forest and lands technician be immediately posted as a one-year contract. Need a mover and a seconder? Grant, Elizabeth? Any comments at all? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, number two, that the full authority approve KCCA's application to the Water and Erosion Control Infrastructure Program for funding for the Dalewood Dam Hazard Potential Classification and Dam Operation Project for a total project cost of $50,000. Moved by Ralph, seconded by Bill. Comments, questions? Joe?
Yeah, just so crystal clear, the total cost is 50, we're asking for half of that from.
We're applying for the WEC, yes.
So the total cost, even out of the capital reserves, will only be 25,000.
Should be, yes.
If we're successful,
And you'll bring it back if it's
Yes.
any different than that, or you'll bring it back either way. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Any other questions at all? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And recommendation number three, that the notice of meeting for Conservation Authority levy approval be circulated. Moved by Allison, seconded by Dennis. Comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, folks. Okay, so Joe, are you up next?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. With regard to the planning regulations activity summary, there is one item in this report that I have some background information as part of a Section 20 violation of in camera. So if it's will of the board and yourself, I'd recommend that we defer consideration of this report until after the closed session.
Okay. Everyone okay with that? Okay, great, excellent. So that takes us to closed session then. So I need a motion to go into closed session. Joe, Elizabeth? All in favor? Great. Thank you. Once again, thank you, staff. Need a motion for the in-camera minutes. Something with the in-camera minutes. Okay, Grant and Ralph. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, update on the legal litigation matters. We just need nothing at all.
It was just for information.
For information only, okay, and the legal matter? For information as well? Which legal matter would we have to go back to?
Yes, correct. Sorry, correct, yes. Just for information.
Okay, the personnel matter, the first one
The first one,
was this.
that the proposed 2019 salary proposal be approved retroactive to January 1st, 2019.
Okay, motion by Bill, second by Ralph. All in favor? Thank you, carried. And then the personnel matter E.
That Jessica Kirshner be placed on permanent full-time staff as the resource assistant.
Okay, motion, okay, from Grant, Elizabeth. All in favor? Thank you, carried. And then the section 28 violation.
And that is that the chair proceed as directed on the
Okay, motion, Allison, seconded by Bill, all in favor? Okay, and then the second section 28 violation.
That one's for information, and then we can also do the planning and activity report from open session.
Okay, so for information, receive for information, motion.
Actually, sorry, Joe, you had 2 motions on that report, right? You wanna say
Yeah,
that?
so I didn't know if you're doing it here, or if you want me to address the open session planning report that we had referred. That still has to be addressed. The matter that was in open session, we referred till after the meeting.
Okay.
So if you like that now, that's just in your advanced packages, the planning summaries of all the permits that have been issued. And we also have the matter of seeking direction of the board to issue a permit for 10 to 16 Sunset Drive. So the recommendations are that the December 2018, January 2018 planning regulations activity report be received. And the second recommendation is that a permit be issued for application 18-038 based upon the application and attachments thereto.
Okay, so do we have a motion? We have a mover. Okay, Dennis, seconder. Grant, all in favor? Carried. That's it? What a marathon that was. Holy cow.
Really, I appreciate your patience.
Good lunch.
This is my 3rd marathon in 3 days.
Okay, so do we need a motion for adjournment?
Sorry, just before you go, just look at your next, I would just
Sorry,
ask
next
that you
meeting,
look
sorry,
at your
yes.
next meetings. So you have the full authority meeting coming up on February 6th, so we'll be looking at the 2018 statements and another look at the budget.
Right.
That starts at 10 a.m., but as advised, we booked in another training session for source water protection beginning at 9, if you can attend that. And then the annual general meeting is February 20th. It's at the St. Thomas Public Library beginning at 9:30.
And it usually is like an hour, isn't it?
Yeah.
An hour and a bit. Do we have guests this year again?
We'll have a guest speaker, yeah.
As far as the kids, are the kids coming from the schools, right?
Not that I'm aware of it.
Okay, great. Motion to adjourn. Allison? Elizabeth, all in favor?